So I feel like in the last little while on the show, we've been discussing art a lot. And I don't mean art just in terms of like discussing art as a concept, but more so like the creation of it, right? And how oftentimes art is inspired by something else. Like the paintings I make in this show come from somewhere. You can draw very clear conclusions to like, okay, this guy's inspired by XYZ, right? And I feel like almost inadvertently in the last, X number of episodes, I don't know how long I'd say this has been going on, I feel like I've kind of come to like another conclusion without meaning to. And this is a conclusion of a question I thought about all the way back, like not a year ago, but six or so months ago. I made this video, it's still up on my main channel, called Is Nature Art, right? And in that video, I was exploring that question of like, nature just seems so beautiful, it seems so great, like there's something very artistic about nature. I'm sure we can all kind of relate to this, right? Like when you look at a waterfall, it can make you feel in ways that no painting ever could. And I was like, that's so interesting. Nature seems so beautiful. Can we call this thing art though, right? And towards the end of the video, I come to a very half-baked conclusion that nature is the conduit for all art. And I never liked that conclusion, even when I put it out. I remember writing it into the end of the script, like coming to that conclusion and being sort of like, I feel like I'm onto something, but I would really need another week or two to come up with a real answer here, right? And I didn't have that week or two. I needed to get the video out, but now fast forward to today, 6 months later, right? That question's always kind of been in the back of my mind of like, what felt off about my conclusion in that video? Where did I go wrong in that, right? And I think coming here today, after discussing for the last couple Paint Talks about art and where it comes from, I think maybe I want to change my conclusion there from like, nature isn't the starting point, or nature isn't the conduit for art, it's the starting point for all art. And the way I'm thinking through this, right, I'd love all your thoughts on this, of course, as always. I usually forget to say that towards the beginning of the episode, but you guys usually have way better input than me, so I'd love your thoughts on this. But the way I'm thinking about this, right, is like, art has kind of developed in more or less of a linear fashion, right? I wouldn't say that we could say you could trace all art back to like one thing, but oftentimes art develops over time because people look at the people coming before them and come up with new things from that, like people from before Picasso couldn't be influenced by Picasso, but people after Picasso can be influenced by Picasso. So there's gonna be a little bit of Picasso in everything that comes after him if they're a fan, like if they like that, right? This is where regional stuff used to come from a lot of the time too, right? Because you get a bunch of people in Paris or whatever, and they'd all be kind of working from the same mediums, coming and looking at the same stuff before them, and then you'd get a regional flavor of like, this is what people are doing in Paris right now. And this is like something that we've discussed a ton on this show, right? I've talked a lot about where like I get my influences from in terms of like comic books and what kind of painters I like and how I see that in my own art oftentimes, even if I'm not intending to. But I think like something I missed in saying that is like, you can totally trace this back, right? I think it'd be pretty impossible to go, okay, I want to trace back from Picasso to the guy before him, all the way back to like people in, I don't know, where would they be? Probably Mesopotamia, doing cave paintings. I think that'd probably be fairly impossible just because like, well, we don't have every last ounce of history. Like we don't know everything still. And also I think there's just too much at a point. I think maybe you could trace back Picasso to like the first 5 guys before him or something like that. It's really bad I'm using Picasso as an example, actually. I don't know too much about Picasso, but just, replace the name Picasso with any artist that comes to mind. You can do that with them, right? But stuff has to come back to a point somewhere, right? I think maybe people could argue about different artists of who's the most influential. I think a lot of people would jump to maybe like Renaissance artists and be like, everything after Da Vinci has Da Vinci in it, right? Like you can point to big artists like that. I think music's like a really easy place you can do that, where it's like the Beatles are a huge one. Like when you go and look at music, everyone after the Beatles is operating off of some of the chords the Beatles used, or some of the ways they'd write songs. Same thing with Mozart. Mozart's a huge example. I'm not educated enough on classical music to say how, but I just know that that's like a thing. That Mozart like basically invented modern music, right? So I want to think about this though from the perspective of just like all art, right? How do you, as a person, as a caveman doing your first cave painting, come up with something to be inspired by? Because most people don't get inspired in a void. I mean, I don't know about the stories of everybody watching this, but I know that I've gotten DMs from people saying what they're inspired by. I know you guys have commented on videos here talking about what your favorite pieces of art are that inspire you. I know I was inspired by something along the lines. For me, I know it was a lot of cartoons that I would watch as a kid that inspired me. I don't think that's an uncommon story at all anymore. But since, on average, unless there's some sort of like genius out there that can imagine things from in a void, people need to get an idea from somewhere. Where did that first idea come from? And I'm thinking there's probably a lot of answers to this, right? Like, I think you could say the human experience maybe gives people something they need to get out there, right? Like, I think you could maybe just come to the conclusion of like, well, you don't need anything to be inspired by when your own emotions can drive art. That's why, like, I think the Epic of Gilgamesh is the first thing ever written by like humanity or whatever. And I always think that's so interesting because like there's stories of like grief and conquest and like triumph in there, right? And I think that does speak to a truth in here that like the human experience in itself is the inspiration of art. Like there's always gonna be something in there. But like past that, right? The first image, where do we think that came from? And the only answer I can come up with is nature. Like I think nature is probably the starting point of all art. And I'm not a historian, so if somebody watching this is, maybe you could help me out here. Because I think there's probably a lot of holes in this, and maybe there's a more legitimate theory lying underneath, you know? But I do genuinely see a case that like when you're sitting developing the first ideas of art, the first time artistic expression's happening, you need to look at something and the beauty that exists within the trees around you, or like the wide openness of the desert. I don't know what Mesopotamia looks like, I've never been, but I know there's a river somewhere near it, so you know, the water in that river inspires because like it's, I guess in some way then it could be a conduit, I don't know. I still think, it's interesting how like nature has this ability to sort of still speak to us in a way that a lot of art doesn't. And I think that kind of further cements where I think like nature's probably like the original art, right? Like not original art that we came up with, but the original art that existed before us. Obviously, this is something to be stated that I never stated in that original video too. If you believe in a god, like if you are somebody who is either a monotheist or a polytheist that believes like God is a direct being that exists, then you would say nature's probably God's art. I think, you know, that logically makes sense. I also just feel though that from a perspective of me coming here and speaking about nature as art, that's kind of like cheating. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna just go with the idea of somebody who believes in God today because that makes this easier for me. I think that'd be kind of cheating. I do think there's something to be said for that though. And I think it's interesting, I kind of got lost my track there, but I think it's interesting that nature has held up over time. Like if you go and tell somebody the story of like something happening in like the Renaissance, right? I'm kind of mad I didn't look up a historical period before doing this. That'd probably be pretty useful. But I think like a lot of the story motifs, a lot of the ideas in art have lost interest to us. Like, I think a big example is like if you go back in time, there were so many paintings of Jesus because for a while the church was the only one commissioning art, and now, you know, after people started painting just humans and other individuals that weren't Jesus, it's almost like people completely lost interest in that because it's done. You know what I mean? It's rare to find somebody today who is genuinely innovating in the field of Jesus paintings or religious iconography of any kind, right? Not because it's bad, but because people have sort of lost interest in it culturally, right? Nature, though, there have been paintings of nature since the beginning of time. There are still paintings of nature, and people still love them. Like, there's still such an interest in this. And I don't know, I just think there's something interesting there. And like, you know, there's something I don't know if I said it here or when I did this podcast a little while ago where I was talking about AI art, and I said basically something along the lines of like, art is not an especially special status, right? Like, I don't think something being considered art should make it seem like it has some sort of divine quality. I think everything's art. I think art is a very ordinary thing. Like, I think it appears everywhere. I will say though, on the other side of that, like, nature certainly has a special status within art, right? Like, we can all kind of see that there's something going on with nature that makes it bigger than all the other stuff that is the subject of art that is around us. And I think like now there's that thing called reference point, right? That for me, like, my reference point is always going to be based in comic books and science fiction, because that's what I read as a kid, that's what I would watch. And because of that, when you come to today, no matter what, there are things I look at, and that's my reference point. Usually it's the first time you saw something and the time you saw it the most. When I was a kid, I smelt soap that smelled like flowers before I actually ever smelt flowers. And since then, all flowers smell like soap to me, right? That's an example of a reference point. However, what was the first reference point? When there's nothing, your only reference point can be the world around you. So like, did nature teach us how to see? Is that what happened? Was nature the first time we ever had something to look at and go like, okay, everything exists in context with this? I think reference point can be used to explain like a lot of people don't like things. Like, you know, if you exist your whole life in somewhere where it's like sunny all the time, then watching any movie that's gray is going to be super interesting to you because you don't see that quite as much. Or maybe it'll be the opposite, that you hate gray because you've only ever seen sun, right? Whereas the other way around, if you live in London where it's raining all the time, movies and paintings that are super sunny might appeal to you more, right? Like, the stuff you see influences the context in which you judge other things. Is that what happened with nature with the first people? Especially because like a lot of that early art just seems like it's trying so hard to imitate nature. It tries, like, it's almost trying to channel it. One of the other places in which I think like is an especially, why I say nature I think has probably a very special status, is that we, no matter how hard we try, can never come up with something as complex, as interesting, and as intricately natural as nature. Like, no matter how hard we try, people have never been able to do it. And I think that's why I also am like, this has a special status somewhere. I think maybe that could be the special status, is like humanity, the first art humanity saw was like trees. So maybe since then it's like everything exists in context to that. I think that could be an answer, but I don't know. I'd love to know what you guys think is special about nature, where you think nature gets its sort of special status from. I don't know, I think it's something super interesting. Let me know your thoughts on that. This is the painting. It's existing with, not existing, oh my god. Look at me getting out of hand with my own painting. But it's just another continuation of sort of this red, spiky, very, like, not brutalist, but I don't know enough about architecture to label this, but yeah, I'm doing more of that architecture stuff in red. I think it's really cool. I'm probably gonna try and not do it soon. Maybe I'll do like a special Instagram post where I like show all the paintings in this, because I just like, I think it has a really cool look to it, you know? So yeah, hopefully you guys like this stuff, because it's been around for long. I think this is maybe the 10th one. It's been here for a minute. So yeah, go check this out over on Instagram. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint and Talk episode 112. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.